Welcome back to Creative Bath, the podcast for creatives. I'm trying out a different intro. I think my previous one was getting a little bit wordy, and I am thinking a lot about who I want to be listening to my podcast, what I'm trying to do here, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I wanted to make an announcement, which is that this podcast is available on all major platforms. The first season is still only on Spotify. It's like really hard to move that, so it's staying put. I also, looking back, that will probably be the season that I'm the most embarrassed about. So we're just going to keep that on Spotify, and that's okay. And a couple of people who I hadn't met before reached out to me and had actually listened to my podcast, and I was able to chat with them, and it was a really lovely experience. So if you're listening, hi. But it's ignited an interesting fear, which I feel like as a person, like when something good happens or when something surprising happens, usually fear comes, I think, when anything new happens. And that fear is getting hate or getting, bad comments and stuff like that. And it's why I resisted posting on YouTube, for example. I have just been afraid of that. The internet can be a wild place. We all know that. It's 2025. Elon Musk. Need I say more? But that leads me to a class that I'm taking called Career Bootcamp with Jo Franco. I saw this class, I think, like a few days before I decided to make the purchase. And I feel like I'm not necessarily certain of where I'm aiming with this podcast. It could just be a fun hobby that's kind of like a journal entry that maybe other creatives connect to. Maybe it turns into something much more than that. But I think one of the things that I really have wanted to make sure I did was make sure I just had fun with it. And I hope that you have fun listening. But I wanted to just quickly talk about something that Jo said, or a couple of things that Jo said in this course. I'm not done with it yet. I'm like halfway through, but already I have a couple of learnings that have just been really helpful. So the first is, and this is in no particular order, but Jo talked about how content creators can be broken up into archetypes, similar to how we can analyze film or TV. You can do that with content on YouTube or other social media. And she talked about how, oh my gosh, now I have to make sure I remember all of the different archetypes. There's the artist, there's the curator, there's the professor, student, and comedian. And those are the general ones that she mentioned. It's interesting because she talked about how usually when you do two of them, like let's say student and comedian, that creates more engaging content or whatnot, as opposed to just having one. When she was talking about this, I was thinking about, okay, like it made me think about when I first started recording this podcast, and I was so stressed because I was recording it in a small apartment in a bathroom, which is why this is called Creative Bath. But I was recording it in a bathroom, and there are all these wild sounds and construction, and I was like, how am I ever going to be taken seriously? And a really good friend of mine told me to just lean into it. Just make it funny. It's okay to have those little moments. And I also realized that that's me. Like, no matter how buttoned up I try to be, like I will trip on something or I will misspeak or something like that. It's just something that I've had to embrace because I'm a little clumsy. But talking about these archetypes made me think about how we have to lean into, I guess, different archetypes in our lives. So I think I want to talk about mainly being a student and a professor. So in a student kind of video, you might be learning something new. You might be trying something out or trying to fix a bad habit that you have. I'm sure that we're all aware of different YouTube videos like that. And in a professor type of video, someone is positioning themselves as an expert and telling you how something should be done, what to not do, all that kind of thing. Something clicked for me with this podcast because in my work as a designer, I have to be the professor. I have to position myself as an expert because I'm working with clients. I'm working with people who need to trust that I know what I'm doing. And so a lot of my time is spent building that trust and credibility and fleshing out ideas and making sure that I'm doing something that's like sound. And in this podcast, I am a student. I am being vulnerable with the things that I'm not sure yet, or the things that I'm learning that I haven't mastered already. And it's been really freeing having that space, because I think as we get older, we're supposed to know more of what we're doing. I think I talked about this in the last episode, but there's a little bit less space to be a student or to be an amateur. And I like having spaces in my life where I can be a little bit different. I don't have to be on top of my game. And maybe at some point I will be more of a professor type of person in this podcast. But if it's just me talking, we'll see about that. And then the second part that Jo talked about that has been really helpful for me is this idea of becoming magnetic. So going back to the beginning of this podcast, I had talked about, or of this podcast episode, I had talked about how I was afraid of people hating what I was doing or commenting something mean. And she talks about how when you step into your magnetism, when you're attracting the kind of people that you want to attract, you're also going to repel others. And in some cases, people will create podcasts or videos or whatnot that are repelling in nature so that they're attracting the kind of people that they want to attract. And I have been a people pleaser historically. We're working on it. We're learning and growing. And I feel like that was one of the biggest reasons why I was afraid of starting a podcast in general. Starting like pretty much anything in my life in general is, oh, what are these people going to think? I don't know. Like, for example, when I first started learning French in my early 20s, I kind of had a similar feeling where I was like, oh, like people are going to think I'm a poser. People are going to, say bad things about me. I'm probably going to sound dumb or look dumb. And feeling dumb is just a part of learning something new, unfortunately, and also fortunately. But I think that this idea that I am going to repel others, that this is not going to be for everyone, is actually really freeing. And I've already started to notice like people in my life where I'm like, oh, I don't think that my stuff is for them. And that's completely fine. Like, we still like each other. Not everything is for everyone. And also, even if it was just me recording this by myself, it still gives me value. So what else do I really need? And I'd love to dig more into what I learned from this class in a few weeks. So I'll definitely do that. But thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, feel free to leave a review, do the star thing. I'm forgetting what that is called. And I'll catch you next time.